Привет, товарищи. I spent a lot of time on this channel, and I'll probably continue to spend a lot of time on this channel criticizing the right-wing or classical liberal views on Brexit as it has unfolded, as it led into the arguments for it, the paucity of the evidence for their claims, and so on. But in doing so, I have neglected to do what I normally do when I make a lot of my more political videos, where I criticize the left from within, or at least the left as it has become from within. So I thought it was time to kind of redress that balance and go after the left-wing people who are for Brexit, or Lexit as it is called. Cards on the table. Brexit is dumb, whatever spin you put on it, and Lexit is perhaps even more retarded. Now, I will concede from the get-go that a left-wing government would better be able to cope with the problems that a Brexit is going to cause. It could soften the blow, it could redistribute wealth, it could compensate by increasing investment and so on into the areas that are going to be hardest hit, ironically kind of protecting them from the damage that they would have done by backing a Brexit. But yeah, I will concede that point. A left-wing government would better be able to cope with the damage that would be inevitable from a Brexit. Were we to remain in the EU, though, as well, a left-wing government would be better able to more evenly distribute the benefits of our membership of that organisation, which would be another way of attacking the problems that led to a poor white working class revolt in the form of Brexit. So, yeah, a left-wing government would be better able to cope, but any left-wing government worth its salt wouldn't do this in the first place. I will also concede that the EU is not perfect, as the wrangling over Article 13 and so on continues to show, and there are various other issues with it. It isn't entirely a left-wing project. There are right-wing or archly capitalistic aspects to it, so while I understand your objections and I concede that it's not perfect, we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And what I find particularly fascinating about this facet of it is that the EU is kind of Schrodinger's EU. Is it globalistic or internationalistic? You apparently can't tell unless you open the box, and depending on who is observing the box, that determines what spin they take on it. You know, is it a Marxist conspiracy, or is it a capitalist globalistic conspiracy, or is it both? Who knows? To me, it certainly seems more like an internationalist endeavour than a globalist one in that sense. Certainly it does help redistribute some of the wealth, bail out countries, help out areas of various countries that are member states of the EU by investing in their poorest and most vulnerable areas, and these strike me as things that any left-wing party should be backing if it's consistent in its beliefs. Surely. Socialism in its proper sense, what some people call welfare capitalism, because they can't possibly concede to themselves that left-wing politics may have meant a great deal of prosperity and development and first world status. But okay, socialism in the actual and proper sense, the non-Marxist sense, requires a degree of prosperity in order to work. You know, a nation's laws, a nation's society can only be as liberal and supportive as it can afford to be. So the more prosperous the overall nation, the better we're able to invest in things like education or redeveloping areas that have lost their baseline industry, providing healthcare, all the other cool, good things that mostly Labour governments have brought in the past that make up the warp and weft of British society depend upon having enough money, enough resources, and so on to go around. Now, if we crash out of the EU, as somewhat seems likely, or even if we leave with a deal, the prosperity of the nation is going to take a severe hit. And as a result of that, any possible left-wing Labour government that got in would have a lot less money to play around with, and could risk worsening and deepening the problems that will come from us leaving the EU. And were the Conservatives and the right wing pushed into opposition, they would then blame any left-wing government for the mess that they created, because it would seem like whoever was in power at the time and overspending and doing whatever else that might be done would be to blame for the sorry state of affairs, rather than us Brexiting. People are always looking for something to blame, and it's been the EU for many decades, and it's going to be hard to convince people that that continues to be a problem if we crash out, and that's causing us harm. But yeah, there you go. So we need prosperity in order to drive socialist endeavours. Again, noting that Article 13 is clearly an issue, and one that really favours the big creators, at least it appears to, as written. Conceding that, the EU has overall been pretty good at wrangling with large multinational corporations, safeguarding workers' rights, safeguarding human rights, and so on. Not as good on free speech as we might have liked, but still, it's broken up monopolies, it's reined in large companies like Google, you know, put them to the mat, like Microsoft and others. So it's been pretty good at challenging and reining in the abuses of corporations. And as a left-wing government in potential, that's something you should be in favour of, and certainly having a big bloc like the EU gives you more leverage, more scope to control, and makes it harder to be corrupted and used. Not that there isn't corruption, but it's harder for people to corrupt. Part of the reason the Conservatives, or at least a good portion of them, are willing to crash out is that they see a future for the UK in disaster capitalist terms. They could make a lot of money. The hedge funds and so on that they work for, rather than their constituencies, stand to make a lot of money from a crash out Brexit. It would also enable them to transform Britain into something of a Singapore of Europe. Some have even said this is their intent. Even publicly they've said this, or something similar. They want to strip away those workers' rights, those various protections and so on, to make us more competitive, which would be ruinous for workers and would be ruinous for the environment. And now is really not the time to do that. So in summary then, if we do Brexit, and whether it's a Lexit or not, Britain will be worse off. We will have less money, less capacity, less room in the economy for social investment, and all those wonderful left-wing programs that you want to bring in and use to better the country and its people. By refusing to come out against it, you're also pandering to the far right, and the left shouldn't be doing that. They should be correcting, they should be, I hesitate to use the word, but they should be educating people. You have the potential to make our relationship with the EU more beneficial and more visibly beneficial to the kinds of people that kicked out against it. Immigrants don't take from this country. They provide the backbone of large parts of our NHS. They pay in more than they take out. The trouble is that the benefits of that paying in don't tend to go to the poorer areas, the places where people have rebelled against our membership of the EU. A left-wing government should sell itself on the idea that the benefits will now be more evenly distributed. The money, the medical care, all the rest of that needs to be spread out. People need to see and they need to understand that this is a project that helps them, that it is an internationalist project, that without it we're going to be sold down the river. That would be the case for Remain that a left should be able to make and should be making. Maybe it's time to get rid of Corbyn. because he won't seemingly budge on this.